So now let's bring it on to the final phase here. Remember, we found the leak. Now we've leak tested it. We fixed the leak, because if you fix the leak, you're going to repressurize it and test it again. All right? That's a give me. Don't bet that your brazing skills will do it the first time. Sometimes more than likely it will. But why take the chance? It takes 10 minutes to recheck that and be sure that that leak is sealed. So take that time. You never have to second guess yourself. Now we're going into, once that leak has been fixed, now you're going to have to pull a vacuum on it. These systems only work when they're dry. That's why if you're doing automotive or you're doing RV or home HVAC, you got to use nitrogen. It's the only real way to be sure that it's dry. All right. Now, what we're going to use is another coil. It's not the same coil. All right. Common sense tell you that the old coil that we had for the prior exercise is not going to work. We have another coil that does not have a leak in it as of right now. So we get our gauges, 3 gauge, 4 gauge, whatever makes you happy. Your unit, your vacuum pump, R22, it'll be labeled on there. And your vacuum gauge. All right. Now they have different styles, and so do we. All right. This is just electronic. They got one that has the Christmas tree lights on it. You know, whatever, whichever makes you happy. What I personally suggest is that you practice using them all. So then you figure out which one you like, and when you go buy your equipment, you'll know what you want. Again, we want to be sure that all the caps are on. Remember, from your training, vacuum pumps, they absorb moisture. That's what that water is designed, or the oil is designed to do, is capture non-condensables. Now, if the caps are off to the atmosphere has moisture in it. You want to look at your sight glass, and you want to be sure that that sight glass is clear. It's halfway up. You know, every manufacturer is a little bit different. All right, you notice that this is only a 3 CFM, so it takes a little longer. When you buy yours, get a 6 CFM. All right, it'll do the job a lot faster. Now, let's look at the ports here. We have a large port, which is the 3/8. That's for your vacuum hose. Remember what I told you? But if you're using a 3-way gauge, you got to use a 1/4-inch hose, which is going to take longer. All right, but this is set up for both. All right, this is the valve that will be, this is in the off position, and this is on the on position. But again, I don't have the time, nor do you want to listen to me talk about every manufacturer's version. Read the manual, understand what you're working with prior to working with it. All right. Now, also, it has the ballast valve. Now, these ballast valves are located in different areas. All right. That ballast valve has to be closed as well. All right. And then this is the oil fill point. Now, in some cases, I'll just say, if you come up to me and say, hey, it's low or it's dirty or whatever, I'll just give you the oil and you're going to learn how to change it. All right. When it's dirty, it'll be a creamy color. You know it's contaminated. Now, the manufacturer says that after every use, you change the oil. Well, we're not going to do that in this classroom. If you're out in the real world, you're going to have to make that determination. Do not cross-contaminate systems. 410A to R22, back to 134, back to 410. Wrong answer. Have a vacuum pump for each one, or if you're switching refrigerants, drain the oil, put new oil in it. All right? But remember, you got to do that. This is the drain valve for it. all right? And of course, it's just like a can of beer, all right? If you open the top, only so much beer is going to pour out of that. But if I open up the top here and open up at the bottom, it's going to have an air vent and it's going to flow the oil out. Here's a little secret that you'll learn at the trade shows. When you go to change oil, turn it on, be sure everything's closed, and run it for like 10 minutes. All right, get that oil hot. Then, with it on, open up that valve, open up that plug, and let it drain out as much oil as possible before it comes empty, and then shut it down. All right, it pushes all that contaminants out. All right, so your 5-minute understanding of a vacuum pump. All right, now check it, because you never know what the other student's done, and that's why we're trying to build this teamwork. You take care of this like it's yours. All right, now we're going to go and pull a vacuum on the unit. All right. Now we're going to pull a vacuum on the unit. Take your gauges and relocate your hoses. All right. This is my low side hose, and I'm looking at my unit. I got the feeder tubes. All right. I know if I have feeder tubes, it's on the high side. So this has got to make this the low side. You notice that it has all the caps on it. And of course, you never have to turn it this tight. This is ridiculous. All right? Because it has an oil seal ring in there, and you're going to damage it. Okay. Again, gloves, glasses, the routine, you know it. Now, I take my low side hose and I attach it to the low side. Now remember, there should not be any refrigerant, anything in the system. That doesn't mean it won't. Nothing's guaranteed except taxes and death. Okay. My high side hose, I go back and connect it. Now this is where you really have to stop and think, all right? Pay attention to what you're doing. I got to have my set of gauges on my unit because that's what I'm reading, all right, to see where I'm at in my vacuum. But in this situation, there's a little bit more that you got to think about. You're going to have another extra hose, and we have extra hoses. And you want to be sure that those hoses preferably don't have valve stems in them, all right? Because I have to put my gauge into my system. Now, here's where it gets a little complicated, and you just got to stop and think. If you're using the 3-way gauge, all right, and you're using this, you got to have another hose. If you're using the 4-way gauges, remember that I talked about that 3/8-inch hose in the back, the large one. This is going to speed up my process. But I want to show you a little trick here. I take my caps off, and part of this job is being organized. All right, put everything in one location. Don't throw it around. All right, be sure that you got it in the proper locations. Now, remember I told you needed the extra hose? Okay, there's several things that you can do here. You can take this 1/4-inch hose and attach it to the back of your vacuum pump. All right, which I think for all intents and purposes will just do that. All right. I take my caps off, set them up on top, and I attach one end of my hose to my meter. I got the other one with the cap on there with a good O-ring in there so it isn't going to leak. Now I take that 1/4-inch hose cap off, and I put that back up on my unit. Now I just attach that spare hose I was talking about. Now there's these things, you can put them together different configurations. All right. But you notice that everything's secured. I don't have things hanging off all over the place, tripping hazards. No, it's up off the ground. It's away from possible situations where I can get myself in trouble. All right, the other option that you got is you could take your 4-way gauge, and remember that hose that I told you that was for refrigerant only, or yeah, for the refrigerant only on this side. Just take that off and attach your vacuum gauge to it. All right, that will work also. You just have to open up your gauge valve. All right, so you know, a little common sense. You got to have this in the system so that you're reading it. On the 3-way gauge, you're just going to put it in line with your low side system. So what you'll do is you'll take off this hose. All right. Now, when you take this off, you would take one side of this meter, screw it in here. The other 1/4-inch hose would screw onto here and then onto your low side. So there's plenty of different methods of doing this. We're going to just look to be sure that you have it in the system. All right. All right. Now, I double check everything. Be sure all my valves are closed, hoses are tight, everything's locked in. All right. Everything's ready to go. Now the rule is I'm always going to work from my unit to my pump. But before you start that vacuum pump, the very first thing you have to do is open up that ballast valve. Open it up about 2 to 3, 4 turns. All right? Think of it this way. When you start something and it's under pressure, it takes a lot more thrust to do that. All right? And a lot more wear and tear on the unit. The book says open it up and let it stay open until you get like 1,000 microns. Don't worry about that. All we're worried about is trying to help the compressor. So you keep that open. That's the very first thing you do. Then you're going to go back to your unit and open up both your low side and your high side gauges. In this case, I'm only using my vacuum hose. So I open up my vacuum. All right, and I'm just doing it in sequence here. I'm coming over here, and now with my ballast valve open already, I can start this up. The button in this one is here. We have different ones that have buttons in different locations. So just turn it on. Now what you're going to see is, unfortunately, if you have any let's say nitrogen or refrigerant for one reason or another. Let's say the unit didn't have a leak and you pulled a recovery on it, all right? But you didn't get all the refrigerant out of here. Don't be standing behind this, all right? Because it could get ugly, all right? Be sure that you do the recovery properly, all right? But if you have a leak in it, for most cases, it'll never happen, all right? But turn it on, and you're gonna notice that if you take your bare hand, you can feel like a little pressure coming out of here, all right? With that on, my next move is to take my handle, my service handle, and move it up. Now you may start to see some smoke, a mist, That's okay. Now, the very last thing you do is you close your valve there, right? So that now you can start hearing it going into a deeper vacuum. Look at your gauges now. You notice that the compound gauge is now reading into vacuum, as well as the high side gauge. All right. Now the reason I have both of these open is because I'm drawing from both sides of the system. It just does it faster. The next thing I want to do is I want to turn on my element here. This is my vacuum gauge. Oops. Got to hold this one. Okay. See how it's starting to drop into microns. And it will go pretty quick for the most part. But we're trying to get 750, 300, you know, in that range bracket in the training room. Now if you notice, the compound gauge is going into a vacuum. So is the high side gauge. I do that because it's speeding up the process. I got it both open on the low side and the high side. I have my gauge on, all right. I have several different types, so this one you just push the on button and hold it for a few seconds and it'll come on. You notice that it's dropping very quickly. We want to get it between 700 and 250 basically microns. The reason that that's dropping fast is because this system is dry. If there was moisture in there, the reason that microns are dropping so quickly is because this system is a dry system. If it was known as being wet, you may take that nitrogen and have to do what they call that triple evacuation. That's what that dry nitrogen does. It absorbs moisture. Right now, fortunately, the students have done it correctly up to this point, and there isn't a lot of moisture in there. Okay? So, for training purposes, you know, 350, 400, 500, that's good. All right? Now, my system is working correctly. Now what I want to do is I want to shut it down and be sure that it holds. All right? So the first thing I want to do is close my vacuum hose. I close that vacuum hose valve, and I close my low side and my high side valve. All right? Now I turn my service valve on my vacuum pump off, and I open up my bleeder valve and shut off the unit. I again close that valve before I forget about it. All right? Now I'm seeing if my system is holding my microns. All right? And there are, okay? The system is working correctly. Plus, if that micron's shot up, all right, that would automatically tell me that I got a leak because it's pulling a vacuum, all right? And it's going to pull air, oxygen, whatever is available in, and that's going to raise those microns up. So this is how you do it. There is no other means of doing it. Anything else than this, you are probably going to be called back on the job. All right? Understand what you've done here. All right? What we try to prevent is to ensure that you don't put air back into the system. So when you're done, don't open up any service valves and stuff like, or the valve seats on this and allow air and non-condensables to get back in there because the next student it's going to take longer. All right? So with everything closed, all right, I can start taking my stuff off. Now, notice something. If you have just those regular hoses that does not have the no loss fittings, you couldn't do this. All right? You would have to be very careful and very quick to pull that off because now oxygen and non-condensables are in your hoses. Right now, that line with these service hose connectors on it it's very dry, all right? And you notice I don't go drop them on the ground, all right? I take my gauge one at a time and remount them. Now, some of this stuff may seem to be really stupid, but I'm guaranteeing you, you're going to do it until you get your own gauges, all right? Because you're in a hurry. But try not to get into a hurry, all right? We're trying to do it professionally and teach you how to do it professionally, all right? Don't be in a hurry and cross-thread threads. As I said, these are very expensive tools. And we're trying to be sure that you guys get the best training equipment available, all right? And I can't do that if you guys are constantly tearing the stuff up, all right? I take all my hoses off. It really doesn't matter what sequence now, because everything is sealed. My unit is in a vacuum, it's sealed, it's in great shape. But I always try to use it as a handgun theory, you know. Work from one direction, either from front to back or back to front. All right. Now, am I done? No. Take your time, put your caps on there, and always be sure that there's an O-ring in there. Because if there's no O-ring, there's no seat. And if there's no seat, then there's oxygen coming in there. All right? And I'm telling you from personal experience, if you take your time, the outcome is much easier. You can get in and out of the job site. You don't have to sit there and be overly concerned if you forgot something. Big problems that we're having, and I know this is silly, is be sure you turn off your equipment. All right? They're 9-volt batteries, but the more money I gotta spend on 9-volt batteries, the less money you're gonna have to train on. Bottom line. All right? Now, wrap up all your cords and put the equipment back where it properly belongs. All right? Now, put it together so it doesn't come apart on the net when you're putting it away. All right? Just take that time, please. It helps out so much more for the next student, and it keeps the equipment up and running for us. All right? If you have any questions, let us know. We'll get you the equipment. We want you to do it correctly and do it thoroughly. Again, I emphasize on the 72-hour thing. Don't be worried about turning in the paperwork. You better be worried about understanding how to do this correctly. Otherwise, you're going to leave yourself open to a lot of problems. And at the end, you're going to need to do this verbatim. All right. So if there's any questions, please ask the staff or the faculty, and we'll answer those questions for you. Again, please take care of the equipment. Treat it properly. If you have your own equipment, you can use that too. All right. Thank you.